All right. Good afternoon, everyone here present in DDA. Happy Monday and happy week 3. And good afternoon, everyone watching us online somewhere on the internet. Be very welcome to the first lecture in this new lecture series called Eyes in the Sky, Birds in the Heart and Mind, the Counterforce Lab lecture series on interspecies friendships, drones, and AR. My name is Jürgen Müller. I'm a lecturer here and a member of Counterforce. I'd like to start this lecture by making a land acknowledgement. The University of California, Los Angeles occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Tongva and Chumash peoples. As the land-grant institution, we pay our respects to Hunuk Vetam ancestors, Hahi Hirom elders, and Iyo Hikem, our relatives, relations, past, present, and emerging. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all. It feels like we are chatting, and with all our busy schedules, it feels so good to be together and have this conversation around the Biophilia Treehouse and the history of the Biophilia Treehouse, the concepts behind this public art living sculpture, and this beautiful student-led project that we've been working on. Just a few words before we dive in, and I present the panel. This is the schedule, so this is the first session. We're going to have, next Monday, I'm going to be in a conversation with Kate Cavanaugh. She's at the UCLA Department of Geography, and we're going to engage in a conversation around kelp forests and drones. Then on Monday, February 5th, we're going to have a beautiful conversation between Elie Diamant, who is here today, and Ursula Heiser, and it's going to be about befriending birds. Then Monday, February 13, Rebecca Mendes here also, and Liz DeLaufrey are going to be in a conversation about the ocean. I have a feeling, right?
Yes, submergence, a lot of the ideas in relation to our understanding of the ocean and our, relationship to it now from time immemorial.
Wonderful. And lastly, on Tuesday, February 21, we're going to talk about environmentally situated augmented reality with Francesca Albarezi. So this is a great schedule, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Rebecca Mendes, who is the chair of the department here, Philippe Otto, who studied here as well, Elie Diamant here, PhD, you're finishing your PhD in here at UCLA in evolutionary biology, ecology and evolutionary biology, and Erin Cooney, who also has an MFA from DMA, and was we're all members of Counterforce, of course, but yeah. Rebecca, can you present Counterforce and this notion of befriending birds and restorative art making in a few words, please?
In a few words is the problem, right? Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I guess I can begin with why even I formed Counterforce Lab, because I started this lab with the idea of it maybe around 2012, 2014, around those years, that my whole practice has been around creating artworks that engage with climate change, with ecological issues, and I felt and my classes as well. I would be teaching a lot of my classes around the sustainability cycle. I collaborated here with the sustainability office at UCLA with, maybe some of you, maybe you were in my classes and all, but it was, like junk battle and dealing with plastics and trash. And so at one point I just felt, I needed to be able to formalize much more and create a community to be able to engage in projects and research that would be more connected to our local community and that would take projects and make them be actionable, right? So many times we do things that are ideas, remaining concept, but as designers, what happens when we are able to affect, like in Biophilia's case, is like the survival of birds, for example, in this case. So then I remember being in a conference in Nevada and met Newton Harrison and Helen Harrison, the Harrisons, that they had their research center in Santa Cruz, the Center for Force Majeure. And it really, I connected so much with the way in which they call themselves. They were the first eco-artists. In the time, in the 70s, 1970s, when everybody was going into land art, and it was about being able to do very huge, very masculine works about blowing up mountains, they pretty much said, no, we do not want to be in this area of land art. We more are eco arts because it matters what the river wants. It matters what the earth wants. The earth is our client. And with that, it was something that to me was so clear that when we shift the way in which we relate to the earth as we're here to serve you, you are a source, not a resource, it really is at the core of the Counterforce. So I began, me and my shadow just getting, some ideas going. And it really has been in the last, I would say, 4 years that we have taken the lab into really great places, and it's really thanks to the group I have here. I mean, it's just, it's been, we are the core and of Counterforce, and it just allowed us to be able to then, we began writing really serious grants to get funded, and so the projects are developing where we are now dealing with much more complex projects. What we are is basically artists, scientists, thinkers coming together to be able to address and engage with the realities of the ecological crisis and the many crises, right? And then we specifically engage with community. We're local, we connect with our community. We're very interested in also bringing the whole concept of indigeneity into the Counterforce. And what does that mean? It's like Indigenous is, it could be from avian to Lakotan to Aztecan to invertebrate. Indigenous is a way of relating and knowing and being in the world, that it really emerges from time immemorial of knowledges and ways of relating to the planet that we, our own Western world, our civilization, has forgotten how to relate to that. We are really, the way that we're moving in our world, in the way that we consume and the way that we extract, is incompatible with life on Earth. So indigeneity is our way back. And so from my artwork and everything is just going back to help us listen to other species, help us listen to indigenous cultures of the region, and let us learn, really radically listen. So I know that went everywhere, but
no, this is so beautiful. Yes.
No, maybe at least it kind of locate us, right, in terms of what the Counterforce Lab is. So
No, that's such a wonderful presentation of the Counterforce Lab, and it's also all those ideas do imbue the Biophilia Treehouse project. So it was very beautiful what you just shared with us, and I really think that yes, the Biophilia Treehouse is this multi-layered project with all those different ideas coming together in a beautiful living sculpture. Excuse me. And can someone give me an elevator pitch of the Biophilia Treehouse? I'm curious.
I talk a lot, so I mean.
Okay. I can try. So, I guess my elevator pitch of the Biophilia Treehouse is that it is primarily at the intersection of design, ecology, science and everything that Rebecca just mentioned, so I would say that's half of the elevator pitch. But it's a living sculpture where the birds are fundamentally the client, but the whole process of the design is also an avenue of community storytelling. And I think what we're going to get into, which I think we describe as restoration, so having space to bring community story, the story of the land, the story of the birds into the art so that people can engage in this kind of interspecies friendship, while also primarily making sure that the structure serves birds, but through birds also plants and other organisms whose habitats have been taken from them. And the goal in the long term is to be able to build a series as a corridor, habitat corridors across Los Angeles and engage in that intersection of environmental injustice in Los Angeles and the injustices to our ecosystems. So habitat connectivity and environmental injustice combined. Is that a good, do you want to add? Cool.
That's a wonderful introduction to the Biophilia Treehouse. Thank you very much, Ellie. And very quickly breezing through the history of the Biophilia Treehouse. This is a project that started in fall 2019. We were invited to this workshop organized by Pando Populous, and 10 other schools were also invited to respond to the first ever LA County Sustainability Plan. And initially, we responded to this prompt by creating, a nature timeout temple. That was the first name of this project, or description, at least. And building on that, in early 2020, we received this Green Initiative funds, which really got the show on the road, so to speak, and we were able to foster transdisciplinary collaborations, onboarding new students, really engage in a very deep kind of research, sketch out the first designs, and all the way to presentations at the end of spring 2020. And then we also took the thinking and the design to the next step by fostering a partnership with Ferdinand Ludwig, who created Baubotanique. It's a German word. It means building with plants, building with trees. And he was from the Technical University of Munich. This is also when we started a collaboration with the Sisters of Social Service. In the fall 2021, we really made a big push. We had around 16 students, 5 different teams: botany, design, structure, communications, and ethnographic arts. Another milestone in the winter of 2022, we finalized the design and started working around landscaping. In spring and summer 2022, fabrication here at the Fab Lab, and then the installation too in Encino. And many grants were written along the way. Many exceptional people were met along the way as well. Field trips, Zoom calls, good laughs, great team dynamics. And we really believed in this project despite COVID and despite all the limitations. We believed in the project's strength and significance and positive impact on bird habitat as well as environmental justice here in LA. Rebecca, I know that this notion that birds are our clients is really dear to you. Can you expand on this a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I mentioned a little bit before, is just the idea of decentering ourselves, and I know that we're going to be talking a little bit about restoration, but that's a big part of understanding, or even the motivation of doing the Biophilia Treehouse, was to be able to, at the core is perhaps a very kind of post-human act of protest, in a sense, of being able to decenter ourselves as everything is human-centered, everything is, just for, again, to serve us rather than to engage with other species as well. So this idea of taking the interspecies friendship with a wild animal began a while back, and I think I'm pointing towards, in the audience, Adam Ewens, who is my partner in life, and also we have fallen in love with the Arctic tern many, many years ago. Him when he was 20, then he introduced me to the Arctic tern, and I'll tell you about that bird because it's at the core of why even we're doing this. But the idea of falling in love with a creature that does the longest migration of any creature in the world, it was a very fantastical, insane idea of them beginning to plan and writing NSF grants to follow this little bird and showing us why the migration mattered. So the migration of the Arctic tern mattered to me specifically because, again, I felt that us as a civilization, we had no desire to survive. We still, I don't think we do, right? We're not doing enough. But I saw the Arctic tern, a determined, beautiful little 4-ounce seabird that goes from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back again, 60,000 miles a year and lives for about 35 years, mates for life, is a creature that sees the most daylight in the world. I needed that, and I still need that, to be able to be motivated enough to really fight for our Earth and our, all the species. So it really is one of those things that each one of us needs to find out where in our heart is what's going to motivate us to just create and invent and do all these incredible things. And so the interspecies friendship with wild animals comes from the, that love of that bird. And I always have felt it's like I want all of you to fall in love with a little warbler as much as you fall in love with your little sister, for example. And what does that generate in you? What does that give you? And so for me, the Biophilia Treehouse, and I do believe that for all of us here in the Counterforce Lab, is a love story. It really is about we have fallen in love with these creatures. I mean, all I can think of is Ellie, you and your beautiful little juncos. Ellie's PhD research is to really kind of understand these incredibly adaptable urban birds. And she has her little flock all around UCLA that, I always walk around and say that there's Ellie's bird, there's Ellie's bird. So anyway, I think that first and foremost, one of the things I wanted to kind of go back a little bit is we basically, Pandopopulus, a member of then Pandopopulus is also Adam, and he's the one who brought us in, right? And it was just a simple competition of undergrad schools and grad schools in LA to come up with ideas to respond to the LA County sustainability. And that one, I mean, I think that, Erin, I feel like I'm dominating this, but it was such a beautiful thing they gave us $1,500, right? And we just ignited and said, we're going to do this. And the reason I'm saying this is that it doesn't take much for you to choose to do something that changes the world, right? We are changing the world slowly for those little birds that are going to find this stepping stones as we create this wildlife corridor. But it has changed my life. It has changed our lives in terms of creating a much more focused counterforce. So maybe, I don't know if you, I don't know where the conversation is going, but
it's going to birds next. But that's a perfect transition.
Anyway,
yeah.
There you go, Ellie.
What about birds?
So what about birds? So Ellie, you grounded a project in science, right? You came into the team and grounded a project in science. And we started with, I'm going to go, this is another rendition, Bird's Eye View, which is a kind of a perfect, I guess, transition to the urbanization and fractured habitats, which was one of our starting points. Mm-hmm. So Ellie, can you tell us about how we are envisioning with Biophilia Treehouse to enhance habitat connectivity, if you can cover
Yeah.
all those notions. So habitat connectivity, indicator species, and maybe start from here. This is a view, yes, another bird's eye view of LA, and the fragmentation of parks and green spaces. Maybe we can start from here.
Sure, yeah. So people don't often realize that Los Angeles isn't a biodiversity hotspot, meaning that we have an extraordinarily large number of species of a lot of critters, including birds. Los Angeles is considered the birdiest county in the United States. But you see a huge drop of bird species richness within the urban habitat. So if you go back to the previous slide, Yogan, that's cool. You can see we have all of these beautiful green mountainous areas and then a lot of gray. And then amongst that gray, if you flip forward, you can see that it's really patchy and there are a lot of areas that don't have any green spots. And that is something that is by design. So historically in urban planning, where green spots or green spaces were allocated, were broadly in more affluent, richer, whiter areas. So broadly thinking about the areas close to these massive green spots. And that's something that really harms bird populations, both those that live here and those that migrate through here, partially because they might not have stopping points, partially because the habitat's constricted in and of itself, so they have less space, fewer birds. Some birds require more space. And in another way, it lowers connectivity. So if you're stuck in a patch, you might not be able to breed with birds. In a different patch, you have to go through a huge matrix that's not suitable. So it can bring up a lot of other problems that are not just because of that green. So in sum, the issues of urbanization and then also the issues of environmental injustice when it comes to green space access, which comes with a whole other flood of issues in Los Angeles, are really tied together, which is why we were thinking about this in a really intersectional way. So if you build corridors or kinds of green spots across Los Angeles, you can increase that bird connectivity across these green spaces. And then I think the next slide is about indicator species, which I can go
There's
through.
something, Ellie, that I know to me that was really strong when you talked about the genetic material.
Yeah, sure.
That's important.
So actually there was an interesting study that came out just recently that there is a really strong, there's a really interesting pattern where genetic variation within species lowers along the lines of redlining in the US. I don't know if you saw that, Olivia. Sorry, she's a... So that's really interesting because it speaks to this problem that's been discussed. When you have fewer organisms living in the same place, or you have these huge, they're called like selective filters, so a certain kind of individual might be able to survive, but a lot of that standing population might not. You have a drop in genetic variation. And that, in general, leads to detrimental consequences for a population. So if you can't mix your genetics, you might have what's called inbreeding depression. So I think like the famous cases of this are with mountain lions and panthers. So in Florida, there was a famous example of like panthers having like weird traits biologically. So like inky tails, I forgot the exact word. And that is a genetically unhealthy organism, and that's partially because of these detrimental variants that end up stuck together because of the small population size. So that can lead to bad effects.
Eddie, do you want to comment? Or maybe this is a kind of, we're circling back to some of the things you just said. So urbanization in LA is a major threat to the region's biodiversity as it breaks apart and shrinks suitable habitats. I think that's exactly what you described here. And in our research, and it was I remember this, using maps, we saw many overlapping factors and which really determined where we wanted to install Biophilia treehouses. And it was essentially based on your research, Ellie.
Yeah,
and
not research I did personally, but research that I found and shared, which is that there is a strong association between socioeconomic status. So areas that are more heavily populated by low-income people of color have the most park poverty in Los Angeles. So they're under-resourced in terms of parks, in terms of green space. And that, yet again, is something by design in the history of Los Angeles planning. And those are also areas that are the least habitat connected and in habitat corridors, so places that can link similar habitat types and connect these desperate green patches.
Wonderful. And we decided to fall in love with these beautiful birds here. Can you perhaps present them in a few words?
So these are a group of indicator species that we focused on for the project in Encino, which hopefully is a prototype for these that we can build across the city. And the idea of an indicator species is basically when you see these species there, they reflect a generally healthy habitat that they need. So these species are generally more sensitive. And when you see them, it means that maybe you have a thriving insect community or plant community, because without that, they might not be able to survive. So this list was generated, we chose these birds because they are historically at the site. In these cases, these are also birds that are close, that live well in the Sepulveda Basin wildlife area, so there is a generally healthy larger habitat fragments, so we know that they're around, we know that they can come, and they've been indicated as either declining or sensitive bird species in Los Angeles County by experts specifically for this region. And they're also very cute, but that's not a factor.
Wonderful. Let's look at this map one last time here, and how this one overlaps with that one, and maybe just kind of conclude this brief discussion about birds on this slide. The Biophilia Treehouse is an intersection between ecology and justice. I'll let you read this slide, and this is going to be a transition to perhaps a conversation between Erin and Rebecca now about restoration and the notion of countermapping through ethnographic arts. And the work we've been carrying out with our community partner, the Sisters of Social Service. And I'm going to put this slide on, and I will have maybe also you, Rebecca, have a beautiful conversation with Erin.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll just start by sort of picking up where Rebecca was speaking about restoration and the importance of it. And you know, we're sort of born into the systems that we live in, and there are certain belief systems that go along with those systems, and they sort of live inside of us, and they become invisible to us. And so what's wonderful about restoration is trying to make the invisible visible again. And what I love about what we are doing is that we are passionate about, you know, we're very aware, we're artists and designers who are aware of ecological crisis and environmental justice, and we want to do something, right? So how did we start doing that? We got involved in what's going on here in Southern California, right? We know through Rebecca's interest in birds about habitat problems in there for this drop in population, and it was a problem we could see and want to do something about. And so what that required was the locality of it, but then it also included something that's very important. So this is all, which is a cornerstone for us, which is interdisciplinarity, right? So we're reaching out to people like Ellie who have the knowledge that we don't have. We are not researchers, we're not scientists. And so we need to go to people who know this stuff and work with them and form teams and bring our different forms of intelligence and disciplines together to work together. It also includes transdisciplinarity, which means working outside the academy and working with community members. So people who are stakeholders in this area who are, you know, working and living on the ground where this stuff is occurring, right? And often that's not here at UCLA, that's people in the community. And so that's what's really exciting about all of those things living within our methodology and rolling that out. So as you can see, we've formed that team here, and of course bringing students on and having their pedagogical experience be a very hands-on one, right? So it's not completely discursive. It's having these things live in art making and projects on the ground with people, with communities, with our science partners who become not just partners but active, participants in this, drivers of this, creatives of your own sort. And then so we get to the Sisters of Social Service. There are several steps in how to work with community. And Rebecca, you can pick it up after I simply say that, the large plan for this, a large vision for this, of course, is to form these wildlife corridors that require several steps. And of course, it takes place in parts of our city, as Ellie mentioned, that have had undergone legacies of social and racial injustice, that correlates with habitat destruction for our birds and plants and all of these things. But in order to bring something that makes sense, we have to build a prototype. And so that's where the Sisters of Social Service came on board here. They are a group of pretty radical nuns, I'd say, in Encino, a part of Los Angeles that is in the hills, so is not a place that is suffering from a lack of trees or habitat, but they have 10 acres. And they wanted to offer us a space for testing, to build a prototype, to see if what we make makes sense and works before we bring it out into the world in places where it's actually needed. So that's where this step occurred. And working with the Sisters of Social Service was an opportunity to also work with the community in the way we want to in the future, which is to listen and form a relationship with this particular community, hear their stories, hear things, their values, what are their histories, what are the things they want to communicate via the Biophilia Treehouse, which will be their Biophilia Treehouse, which will get inscribed with their storytelling. So we had to develop a methodology for forming relationship, hearing stories, inputting stories, creating insignia that then get placed onto our temple, and that's what we did in the year 2020 through 2020, no, 2021 through 2022, yeah. Right? Yeah. Do you want to say more about that?
Yes, I think that, one of the things I wanted to even just go back a little bit to why the Sisters of Social Service, why religious women are the ones that are leading in this area of welcoming environmental justice. And it's because throughout history, they have been known to do social justice, right? Social care. And they see that what really the world needs now is to go beyond the social justice to environmental justice, because in the kind of strategy of injustice, you first displace the people from their land, so they are pretty much suddenly, they cannot farm, they become dependents of a structure that you have imposed on them. Then you can really kind of commit a lot of more injustices. So it begins with the land. So Pando Populus began an interesting conversation with the Sisters of Mary Knoll in Monrovia, and then the sisters here in Encino about expanding that social justice to environmental justice. Just imagine that all of these different sisters will suddenly begin to take action around environmental justice. It is life-changing, right, and world-changing. So that's an exciting thing of the Sisters of Social Justice. One thing that it was really wonderful was, again, just this idea of kind of moving us into an even more interdisciplinary team, is that we brought in Lily Flores Aguilar. Erin was associate director of the lab from what year to what year?
From 2020 to 2022.
22. And then Lily and Ellie took on the associate directorship together for 6 months or so. And then, and that's when Lily comes in, and then Ellie is the associate director now. But what Lily brought in she's doing her PhD at World Arts and Culture, and her focus is exactly in restoration. Just how is it that we then decenter our primarily Western white practices and systems. So she came in and led these workshops. And the idea was not only then to kind of understand the culture of the sisters, but really kind of go deep and back into who were the first inhabitants of this land and who were the latest indigenous cultures that continue to still pretty much, it's an unceded territory, right? So it basically is the Tatavian, right? It's the Tatavian indigenous cultures that they still can recall the land being stripped from them, like their great-grandparents. So it was really a very, very difficult relationship to engage in. They pretty much were not at a point where they were ready to be, come in the terms of the sisters, but they want to come in their own terms. So we are in conversations still about those. Those will take years, and that's the thing about when we engage with indigenous cultures, whether they are birds or invertebrate or humans, is like time works in very different speed, and we need to be open to that. So anyway, workshops happened. That was exciting. Lots of conversations, a lot of research, and then be able to develop an entire system of symbols. Now, why symbols? Symbols is a way of being able to go beyond one's language, right, and to really address all cultures. And so that's where we ended up. And then they ended up being, and this one was led by Jason Lee, who is not here. Jason has been designer for my studio. He's a DMA grad, undergrad alumni. And so he led that whole area of pyrographing. So let's go into that area. So one way that we began working towards creating symbols and writing stories, inscribing the Biophilia Treehouse with stories, histories, the story of a bird, for example, here. Which one do we have? The scrub jay. Look at that over there. That is actually the abundance of the scrub jay when you are able to find it there the most. So for example, if you look at September, October, abundance is high, and then in April, abundance is also high. So therefore, you're able to understand when you can come and look for the bird. But I think that, this idea of inscribing, when we began selecting the materials of the Biophilia Treehouse, that again, all of the design is informed by the bird's needs and wants. I'm sure they have wants that they're telling Ellie. So that we were able to find the material that would be able to be perfect for spider webs and insects of all kinds, and really kind of create a complete habitat that would be conducive for the health of these birds. And the only way that we could actually inscribe was by pyrographing little dot by dot. So of course, design-wise, we had to come up with a strategy that would work. Anything else that you want to say around the restoration or any?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say about restoration is I began my comments by talking about the belief systems that sort of get inculcated in us as young people into the systems we enter. And what I love about what Counterforce's mission is about is challenging those belief systems that are faulty, that are causing us and other beings harm, and the earth itself harm. And I've recently gotten very inspired by this writer Amitav Ghosh, who I've mentioned before, who's written a book called The Nutmeg's Curse. And he tells us, he's a creative writer, and he tells us that the mission for artists and designers and writers, creatives who are, concerned about ecological crisis and environmental justice, you know what you can do? You can, with your creativity, reanimate the earth. Retell the story of the earth being alive. Counter the faulty notion that the earth is inert matter and is just scaffolding for us humans to have our dramas across. Show that it is alive and whole ecosystems are occurring, and we need to honor them and see our place in them, decenter ourselves from them, and live amongst them, and literally build things, design things in the world in which that is taking place. A new belief system is living and imbued in the things you make. And I love that that is the mission of Counterforce Lab. And for me, you know, because often we talk about restoration in a very didactic way, we talk about it, but when we can do it and build it in the world in this way that works together with all these different disciplines and points of view and community members, wow, that is very powerful. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because it's like we always, with this project and with everything we do, we're co-creating with nature. And that really kind of puts us side by side with other ways of being in the world that just opens your mind in beautiful ways. Yeah.
Wow. Where do we go from here?
Plants, we're going to plants.
We go to plants.
You're like, this man has a story to tell.
So, Philip, you've been instrumental in working with native plants and selecting plants to attract birds. So I guess we can just switch to that section here. So these are some of the native plants and trees that we selected and that we want to work with.
Oh my goodness, you need to be talking to a mic. Otherwise you're not recorded, ma'am. So there you go. Sorry about that, I'm recording it.
So I was saying that, first of all, where do we go from there after this beautiful conversation? I guess we can go to native plants and trees. So Philip, you've been instrumental in selecting native plants to attract birds. You were in a conversation with Ellie, but you were instrumental in also designing the landscaping around the Biophilia Treehouse. So if you can take us through this beautiful selection here. I have a few other slides, and can you tell us a little bit about the whole process?
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen. I've always had a strong affinity for plants. I grew up in Los Angeles and love hiking and being outside. But it really wasn't until I started working with the Theodore Payne Foundation for Native Plants and Wildflowers that I started to see that incredible connection between plants and insects. So a lot of insects are specialists. They have co-evolved over thousands of years to only be able to digest certain enzymes within certain plants. Because plants, of course, as an evolutionary strategy, generally don't want to be eaten. So these incredible relationships, though, have co-evolved where specific insects are able to digest and actually process otherwise toxic plant compounds. So when I started to become more aware of this incredible connection between specific plants and specific insects, and then specific insects and specific birds, and it really changed the way that I came to see plants, because I think all too often we see plants as decoration. And as a landscape designer and working with clients, we often tend to, in that trade, view plants as merely, decor. It's something that to look nice, we kind of roll them out as if they're, we literally roll out turf grass as if it's a carpet. But that's really not an adequate reflection of the incredible role that these plants provide in our ecosystem. So from early on in the Biophilia Treehouse project, we of course knew that plants would be the foundational backbone of our installation, because wherever these interventions are going to take place, they have to really consider the native plants that are indigenous to that area. So beginning at our first site, which is in Encino, The first step was to consider what plants were growing locally on site that were already existing. So we had these beautiful coast live oaks, which are on the upper right, Quercus agrifolia, incredibly iconic keystone species. If you look closely enough at an oak, it's impossible to not notice it teeming with life. The closer you look, the more you see. They're just incredible species. So we already have an incredible oak canopy at our site. So we're not actually planning on planting additional oaks, but we are caring for the existing oaks that are on site and nurturing the next generation. So on site, we already have small oak seedlings that are coming up from acorns. Then we also have our native elderberry, which is on the upper left, which is another really important habitat plant. They provide beautiful bright white flowers, which turn into bright blue berries, which are really important food source for a lot of birds and insects. And then the two other shrubs that we have on site, we have our laurel sumac, which is on the lower left, and our toyon. Toyon is one of my favorite plants. It's the official plant of Los Angeles, and it's just a really beautiful shrub that is existing on site. It provides beautiful nectar when it's flowering, and then the seeds develop these bright red berries, which are also a food source and a beautiful show of color. We actually do have seasons in California, and it's plants like the toyon that remind us of these seasonal changes that do occur.
And then we have the black sage, bush and flower, California buckwheat, and California sagebrush here on screen.
All of these are because
You need a mic, Rebecca.
Ellie, gracias. These are because Ellie talked to the birds, and the birds said they wanted this. So it's not Philip's choice, right?
No.
So each one of your birds, of our indicator species, really love those. Like, maybe even the toyon. Who loves those?
I don't remember the entire list, but I know, like, for instance, a lot of birds like berries. I know waxwings love berries. But it's also that it's not just what they eat, but all these birds have a whole life that they have to go through, so they need to build a nest, they need to find places for protection. You have birds that eat grains, hence we have a lot of different kinds of species or seeds. So we needed a variety to account for all those different birds that we saw in the previous slides, but they also need to be structured in a certain way. So if you have a ground nester, it might have to nest in a place that's a bit more hidden, so it needs a certain kind of grass. So it's not just what they eat, but it's also how they live, which is pretty cool. But I'll
The grasses really are for that, yeah.
Yeah, so these are the vines that we selected as possible candidates to encircle the structure, so the physical structure of the installation. And something that was really enjoyable to me about considering all of these plants is really going back to this idea of decentering myself as the designer, but really thinking about what do the birds want, and also what does the land want? So all of the plant species that we selected, in addition to thinking about their relationship to the birds that we wanted to provide habitat for, we went for hikes in the surrounding areas to figure out what are the species that are already growing there in undisturbed areas. So what does this land want if it were not for our own intervention? So how can we support what it wants? How can we, restore this land to what it would have been and kind of back to its full potential? So we have our wild cucumber, which is a really special vine that if you go hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains, you will surely see. Like a lot of common names, it can be a little bit misleading. It is not remotely edible to humans, but it has these really incredible spiky structures, and as they dry out, they become these incredible little architectural specimens. We have our hairy honeysuckle, which has beautiful sweet scent. And then we have our Pacific blackberry, which is another example of a plant that is edible across different species, including humans. And I love this idea as well of providing plants that really foster interspecies communication and interspecies empathy, and really thinking about these plants as providing for all life on multiple different levels. So they're providing for us directly, they're providing for the birds directly, but also indirectly through the ecosystem services that the birds are providing for us. Without the birds, without the insects, we will cease to exist.
Here we have the master plan in a way, right, for landscaping. Biophilia Treehouse. If you could describe perhaps what we have here.
Yeah, so this is again the top-down view of our site. So there's quite a bit of topography here. We see the plant on the upper left, the QA, that's one of our large existing magnificent oak trees that overhangs the site. And then of course we have our physical structure. On the inside of the structure, we have an elevated raised bed where we have some grasses and surrounded by a ring of our woodland strawberries, which are related to the strawberries that we cultivate. They are also edible. So that provides a really nice habitat space, and then that space is also protected by not only the architecture of the installation, but also we have our Pacific blackberry vine that is covering the structure. And then surrounding the structure, we have shrubs of different heights to complement and supplement the existing shrubs that are already growing in the area. So we have additional laurel sumac, we have buckwheat, we have bush sunflowers, and one of my favorite plants, California sagebrush, which it's also another common name is coyote cologne, or cowboy cologne. It has a really wonderful fragrance to it. So again, kind of thinking about the multiple layers that we're creating in this site that is so rich with life and experiences. So I'm really looking forward to being able to just be at the site and observe and see what can you smell and what can you see. It's really beautiful to think about kind of how this space can be fully expressed. And I also just wanted to note, of course, that as I've been mentioning, these specific plants, of course, are very specific to this site. The whole idea or concept of native plant species, this is of course worldwide. And these are the plants that are appropriate for this specific area that have evolved over millennia with the unique geology and with the unique plants and insects that are at this site. But wherever future sites are installed, we'll of course consider what those unique conditions and plant communities look like.
And we are having now, thank you, Philip, that was beautiful. We are having a class of a professor, Allison Lippman and Laren. Do you want to talk a little bit about just that that we're engaging them and planting begins in a month
February
or so?
11th?
11
I
and
think.
12,
yeah,
exactly.
There's a class in EEB, I think it's Restoration Ecology, California Restoration Ecology, that is going to be involved in learning about the plants and then planting the plants, and that's with Laren Gorlitsky and Allison Lippman.
So they're working from this proposal to then expand and be able to make it be part of their class. So it's going to be an exciting day.
Learning for the students too.
Yeah, everybody's welcome to come that day of planting. It'll be nice.
Alrighty. And maybe, Rebecca, you can also describe now that we are going to move to the fabrication and the installation of the Biophilia Treehouse, its first iteration. You led this effort in such a beautiful way, masterfully. So this is, I guess, a rendering of the Biophilia Treehouse here to fabricate it, to laser cut it, or maybe CNC mill it. We use very advanced technologies here at the Fab Lab. And I was behind the camera, I was taking pictures and I was filming the whole process, and it's just to show you how all those ideas kind of materialized in concrete forms here. So we have Camille here, who is also an alumni from the School of Arts and Architecture, and she also led this effort. Can you perhaps say a few words on this collaboration with Camille?
We haven't seen the design, right?
The design?
You haven't shown the design yet, so it's interesting. We're going into fabrication before the design, so maybe we're going to just reveal in the end.
It is no, it is revealed already
okay.
here. Yeah. We already
But
this.
the actual one. So it's an interesting thing because one of the things that we wanted was to be able to make sure that this again is designed for the birds. So we had many, I was leading the design team, and then Camille and Jason worked beautifully in the design. Camille from architecture, Jason from DMA. And one of the designs were beginning to feel very human, like, they felt like it was for humans. And at one point, I remember we had a conversation in one of our meetings, Ellie, and you said it's like the birds need to see what's there for them. And we began sketching, and I remember looking at the fall sticks, the wooden sticks. Pickup sticks. So pickup sticks for me always felt like it was a good method to be able to do something very modular. That could be large, it could be small, it could be. So I wanted to work with these sticks because I also felt it was a way of us being able to have plants hanging from them or anything. So we began playing with the sticks, and basically we didn't have those pickup sticks, but we had spaghetti. And with Jason, it was beautiful because I was telling him, it's like, this thing needs to somehow feel like it's opening. And I said, put them in a glass. And he grabbed a spaghetti, put it in a glass, and it just went zoom. It opened up. So what's our inspiration? That, right? And it's something that you need to kind of have a sense of what is it? What's the action you wanted to be able to do, open up to the sky? And all what we then needed to do is to make the glass smaller for the opening to be bigger, make the glass taller, and the opening would be narrower. So if you think, of course we worked with Camille endlessly. She refined many designs that I wish we could be making all of them. But this was the one that ended up being so beautiful, and with her incredible sensibility of being able to just then refine the spacing of it, of each one of the sticks. We have various different sticks there. We have bamboo, we have steel rods. Well, some of them were going to be longer. Different levels. I think that the levels are very specific based on what Ellie was sharing with us of the needs of the birds. As Philip was mentioning, we have a elevated ground, and that elevated ground is for the ground foragers and ground nesters, like the towhee and the sparrow, but the sparrow is not in our list, right? Or is it?
We have a
Song sparrow. So they would love to nest there, but they needed to be able to feel safe and nest it. Perdón, I'm giving you my back. Sorry there. And then on the upper part, we are having the birdhouses that, based again on what Ellie was telling us, for example, the birds, for some of them, like the bluebirds, the actual hole of the tree, whatever they like, needs to be facing. Oh, it was great, but Ellie gave us instructions. That needs to be this diameter and must be facing southeast or something like that, right? So all of it is definitely based on the science that Ellie researched for us. This is the fabrication.
Sorry, just to add, it also accounts for interspecies, like social interaction. So a bluebird might be more dominant over a titmouse.
Yes.
If you make a hole that a bluebird can't fit into,
Yes,
then you have a place for a titmouse.
exactly. And so we did that. We did some for bluebirds, some for titmouse, mice. They're adorable. And, but Camille and Jason just took care of this design beautifully. And what else? Camille is, I have to say, not only an incredible designer, but she is an amazing fabricator. And she would call everybody, like, the steel structure. She knew exactly who to call to get the steel done. So the parts of the Biophilia Treehouse are basically a steel structure that holds everything in place. Steel ring around the bottom and in the middle to be able to hold the angle and all of our elements in angle. They are sunken about maybe 1 foot down. So anyway, it was just beautiful. We'll see, I'm sure, maybe more images of the
We
design.
have more images for sure, yes.
So there we are, making the birdhouses. Let's keep going on the images. Jason, also working on the birdhouses. There they are. And we're on site.
And we're
All
on
right.
site, and this is yours truly here. And this is a time lapse. That was back in May, I believe, working with gardeners to prepare the site, essentially.
Yeah, Apolinar and Apolinar Sistos. He's been our gardener for about maybe 10 years, so I knew who to call. It just would be. And Lalo. So anyway, the land it's very dry, so it was the hardest thing to be able to break ground. It was like a rock. So that's something that, we know that it's we wanted to be able to just live with the available water that comes from the environment naturally. Obviously, we first need to establish them strong this winter, but hopefully, I think that hopefully by the summer that it really needs very little water and they get accustomed to the natural cycle.
And then the tour de force.
Oh my goodness, this one. One of the things that we wanted was to
Look
make
at
sure.
the structure is here.
Yeah, there we
It
go.
was a real tour de force, I remember.
These screws were important because there is no cement. Cement, concrete, all of that is poisonous to all life, poisonous to the earth. So Camille spoke with this specialist that we'd be able to do these incredible screws, very deep that they go. Look at that. The earth was so incredibly dry that it was a feat to be able to make them, put them in the earth. And then that's our base. So this is something that we want this to be a kit of parts, and it is. It's a kit of parts that is reproducible and that can be placed along the wildlife corridor that is needed along the LA River. That's our most important one. The next one that we want to be able to establish is at Ola. the heart of Los Angeles. School after our school for the kids of the neighborhood around Rampart. Yeah. MacArthur Park, where Ellie has been giving classes of.
In the Yale lab, my colleague Wilmer Miami and I have been. We built a class for third graders, after school class, to be engaged, hopefully in community engaged research with our lab, and then hopefully with Biophilia Treehouse, with Counterforce. So it's urban ecology and like local birding. So it's really getting to know your birds. How do you make questions, and just the fact that, you know, nature birds are all around us. So being more aware, and yeah, it's been fun. So yeah, they're an education equity organization, long-standing, I think, for 20, 30 years in the MacArthur Park area.
And that's our next fantastic collaboration. We're going to definitely continue to be writing our grants to be able to achieve that goal. And in a way, we call it decolonizing the university by actually bringing the classes to them, and us being able to bring this, you know, live laboratory to their land and their space. So here we are. So this is the stage that we're in.
And that was in July, I believe.
July,
right?
exactly. And so what happened, you know, in terms of what you're seeing here is basically, again, the soil bed. You see the rings. Those rings hold all of our components in place. And then the upper part is for the birds. So now the next thing will be just the landscape. And we will start also beginning to do the science, right, Ellie? I mean, I think that in terms of observation, bird count, just observation and taking the data to see, even within this very luscious space, it's going to be difficult for us to kind of evaluate what our plan really would be in terms of being in an urban setting. But we can see, if at all, right, what is it that we can refine in the design? Because design is an iterative process. So we always are kind of like putting it into the world, and then we respond, and then we adapt, right? So we continue iterate in the design process. But I think that maybe we can talk about what the next phases are in terms of observation.
Is Charlene still here? No, she left. She was involved with there were a lot of undergrads that worked with all the teams. So we had a team of undergrads through the Sustainability LA Grand Challenge Office, Sustainable LA Grand Challenge Office, that together we came up with a study designed to monitor the birds and see where are they, both in the land outside of the Biophilia Treehouse, what are they doing? So are they using the spaces as we hope that they do? Are they foraging, for instance, on the elevated ground as they forage on the ground? Are they nesting? So then we can see if they're actually viewing it as suitable habitat, even when they have habitat, basically. So that's
It sounds like a beautiful plan. And with that, I'd like to conclude this first lecture with these words. If more of us can come to truly fathom the truth of our interconnectedness within the ecosystems we inhabit, we believe that a fundamental shift in how we design our built environments shall happen. This is what we've been trying to do with the Biophilia Treehouse project, and this is what we'd like to inspire you to do as well. It's been so much fun to kind of have this, let's say, fireside chat with you for today. Thank you so much. We should do it more often.
Of course. No, and we will. No, we have a few more coming up.
We do have a few more.
Wait, I think this is going to be great. We are a Counterforce.
We are a Counterforce.
We are a Counterforce. Thank you.
Thank you. We might have a few minutes for questions, if you have a few questions. And Mike will find you, yes. Oh,
I'm stuck.
you're stuck. Oh, no.
I'm seriously stuck.
You are. Uh-oh.
Okay, there you go. There you go. I am stuck right now.
I'm supposed to be here.
Or take the
Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to share an update on this project. This is phenomenal. I'm really excited to learn more about what's going on. And I just had one question. As a quantitative ecologist, I am always curious about point count data and numbers and getting population estimates and all that jazz. So I'm curious, was there any baseline data taken on bird abundance, relative abundance, or occurrence dynamics at the site prior to the installation of this beautiful piece of art that we could compare to? Or is this really a project that moving forward we want to see specifically how birds are interacting with the artwork and taking a more behavioral approach?
We did do point counts before.
Eddie.
For the internet, we did do point counts before. So we did a bird walk with Bruin Birders Club and Bruin Birding Club. So we did do that. We did another one this season after it was built with no vegetation, and that's the plan. So the plan is to have kind of two, at least once each season, and then also be able to have behavioral data, ideally. Now, it's not a lot of data, one point count before. The goal in the longer term is to understand the dynamics with the corridors, so be able to do point counts across the potential sites and then also see shifts over time, ideally. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Come to bird there.
Just come.
I would totally help out if you needed help.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
With that, I guess I can announce the next lecture. Next Monday, I'm going to be talking with Kate Cavanaugh from the UCLA Department of Geography, and we'll be exploring how drones, remote sensing, can help us understand the kelp forests here in the California Bight. So next Monday, mark your calendars, 12 p.m. here in the EDA. I'll be in a conversation with Kate. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.